Good morning. Getting started here a couple minutes late. I don't think that's too big a deal. Hopefully everybody's doing well with all the snow here in Wisconsin. I'm assuming that the snow is in other parts as well. I know up by my dad in northern Minnesota, they got quite a bit of snow too, so I guess winter wasn't over. Just a reminder, they've extended tax day. I've got a notification here on my phone, tax day is tomorrow. Don't believe it is, but I'm going to be sending out my extension anyway, just to be safe. So that they can't come back and tell me I owe money later, right? Try to get back their $2,900. Hope everybody's receiving their money from the federal government that was promised. I know we did, which is going to be very helpful. Not enough, but every little bit helps. And hopefully we're going to see something better from our legislatures around the country, but more importantly here for us in Wisconsin, related to unemployment and health insurance, which I've been talking about quite a bit. And they're announcing they're going to hold their first session here in Wisconsin tomorrow. Some people will be at the Capitol, some people will be doing it remotely, and they acted like it was some major coordination effort. And they're using Skype for Business. That takes about an hour. So you got to wonder why they're dragging their feet. So as always, thank you for joining me on my show this morning. Please subscribe, please like the video, and please share the video. And also, of course, visit the channel and watch those videos that I have from ongoing shows here over the past couple of weeks. And we also then post shows weekly as well, longer shows, which I wanted to say that initially, but these shows seem to be going anywhere from an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, which is great if we have that much to talk about. We'll be covering a news article that I found very troubling by CNN. Of course, we'll all do a quick COVID update, and then we'll talk a little bit about elections. So today is April 14th. National election has started for November, and as part of that process, we've got the regular election in November, of course, but then in order to get ready for that, we have a primary in August. And I know that the media is doing a terrible job of covering what the process is going to be. We all know we have a special election coming up for one district. It's not the whole state, and many people are up for re-election here in the state and around the country. And so if we ignore the special election on May 12th for the moment, our elections started for this year and for the 4-year cycle at the Iowa caucus. And tomorrow we will start the nomination process for every candidate that will be running on the November ballot. And then, of course, if multiple candidates in individual parties show up, then of course they'll be in a primary in August to determine one candidate in each primary for the November election. Then we'll cover a response from the Wisconsin Elections Commission that I'm very troubled about, and we'll do that later in the show. So let's talk a little bit about a news article that came out yesterday regarding actions taken by governors on the East and West Coasts. I'm not sure if you were able to see that article. I'm hoping I can help bring that to you a little bit here. Here we are at CNN politics section. Governors on East and West Coasts form PACs. So is that a PAC, or are they playing words and it's actually a pact to decide when to reopen economies? So first problem I have is with that title. Everybody should be troubled that our well-being is being decided by one person in every state. And sounds a lot like dukes, duchesses, all barons, whatever you want to call them, making decisions for us. And as I read through this article, you'll come to understand why it gets more and more troubling. They have no business making these kinds of decisions on their own. And if we, in the state of Wisconsin, were foolish enough to give our governor that kind of power, then we need to make sure and take it away. And we got to get with our legislators and make sure they understand they need to vote this a different way, and they need to take better action on this as soon as possible. Sorry, my Safari has been locking up. Give me just a quick second. Of course, so I'm having technical difficulties here this morning. I apologize. Let me try and get this corrected. But the article goes on to talk about how governors on the east and west coasts are joining together to fight the president on any decisions the federal government makes to reopen states or direct states to reopen to get the economy going. And what should be interesting to note is that most of these governors, if not all of them, are Democrats. And more, this looks like a ploy to make the president look bad. Well, as much as and as hard as it is to discuss that, again, the numbers still don't support this extreme reaction to this virus. We're not even close to 50,000 deaths yet, and we were all being told when we had to shut down, we were going to hit 100 to 240,000 people dying. People are still going to work. People are still going to the grocery store. The virus is still spreading. It's just not as bad as what they told us it would be. But of course, because they took this action and put everybody out of work, and put businesses potentially out of business, that doesn't matter because they're going to take credit for stopping the spread. See if I have any luck here. Almost there, I apologize. I emailed myself the article, and for some reason it's having a problem loading. Okay. A quick second. So, basically, this article goes on to say that states on the country's east and west coasts are forming their own regional pacts to work together on how to reopen from the stay-at-home orders each has issued to limit the spread of the novel coronavirus. The first such group to be announced came Monday on the East Coast. Democratic New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said his state, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts each plan to name a public health and economic official to a regional working group. The chief of staff of the governor of each state also will be part of the group, which will begin work immediately to design a reopening plan. There's nobody from the legislature planned in those states to be part of that group. I mean, you really got to get concerned about this. I mean, the governors are not making any attempt to include bipartisan representation in these groups. They are controlling who will be on it and who will make decisions. That doesn't provide representation. Later on Monday, the West Coast states of California, Washington, and Oregon also announced they are joining forces in a plan to begin incremental release of stay-at-home orders. Governors of these three states will collaborate on their approach to getting back to business in a safe, strategic, responsible way, as announced by California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. Again, Democrat. and controlling who will be part of that group. They're not engaging the legislature. They're not engaging both sides of the aisle. They're controlling what's going to happen. I wanted to read. It goes on to say the announcement by the West and East Coast governors on Monday appeared to be an effort to preempt pronouncements coming from the President of the United States, who has said he will likely introduce his Opening the Country Economic Task Force during his briefing on Tuesday. Governors on both coasts hammered the notion that their decisions will be driven by facts, science, and public health professionals, not politics. And the facts are, the numbers aren't there supporting what they're doing. So, I mean, that's just a baloney statement on its face. President Donald Trump foreshadowed the looming clash with local officials in a tweet Monday morning, pushing back against some of the governors who have said in recent days that they hold the authority to decide when they reopen their state economies. Now, I mean, that very statement should trouble every single citizen of the United States. That the governors believe that because they were elected to office, they now have the power to decide our very fate. If that's the case, man, we really screwed up. For the purpose of creating conflict and confusion, some in the fake news media are saying that it is the governor's decision to open the states, not that of the President of the United States and federal government. Let it be fully understood that this is incorrect, Trump tweeted. So, and they've gone on, and I'm sorry, I'm still having some technical issues with my internet, obviously, this morning, as always, but I'm hoping the internet I'm using to broadcast is working well. It seemed to be this morning. The article goes on to also express the fact that the governors fully intend, if need be, to sic the local police and sheriffs on people to control them. I mean, you can hide it or clothe it or put it in a different package, but it's all the same representation. Governors are saying, I'm in control, you will listen to me, and if you don't, I will put the police on you. And ultimately, if they feel like it's not going well enough with local law enforcement, they'll bring out the National Guard. And wow. I mean, last night after reading that article, sitting in my chair, thinking about life, I mean, they're actually talking about making wearing masks mandatory so that you literally could be arrested for being out in public without a mask on. We all need to go back to science class. We're going to have to gain exposure to this virus. We're going to have to build an immunity. They're going to have to get antibodies going out there. Or why the hell even live if you've got to walk around in a mask all day long? It's not necessary. The state of Wisconsin has numbers, which we're going to go over in a few minutes, that just don't support this kind of extremism. So wanted to share that with you. And with the coming elections, I think it's important to think about just how your representation did for you. I'm not very happy at all. I'm not happy with the senator. I'm not happy with the associated assemblyman in my district. I think they've drugged their feet. I think they've ignored the obvious. I think they have done nothing to help people who are suffering and trying to figure out how to pay their bills in the coming months. Because April's got a cushion to it. This April's not going to be the month we're going to see the problems. It's going to start being in May and in June if companies aren't hiring back, and depending on how quickly they reopen the states, so that commerce can get started and people are needed to get work done. I mean, if there's no commerce, then there's no work. So you can reopen the state all you want, but if we don't create commerce very quickly, forget it. So as we discuss things related to elections later in the show, just we'll be going back to food for thought at the end of the show. So I'm writing it down because that was a new part of the show that I've added, and I get caught up and forget. So, all right, COVID-19. Let's take a quick look at what we see this morning on the CDC site and on the Wisconsin site. All right, of course, CDC has been updated as of April 13th. And right now, the CDC, as of April 13th, is reporting 554,849 cases. Total deaths right now, as reported by the CDC, are 21,942, which are still below, or well below, 32,000 deaths we'll have from influenza this year, or more. I mean, that was last year. So they're not reporting any of the data once again, and comparing it to what's going on with the flu and how the hospitals are overrun with people for influenza and being hospitalized for the flu. And we don't show in the CDC data how many people have been hospitalized. Where right now we have total cases that equal the number of people hospitalized every year for the flu. So I'm still perplexed as to how we're getting to the point we are, and how we shouldn't be considering the fact that there is a portion of this that's driven by politics. Because the way this is happening, and the people who are, pushing this the most, want to see the president out of the office. So here's again the chart as it relates to cases per day. Again, the chart's not climbing; it's continuing to turn and go down, and so that's good news. And so our governments should be working to get things open, because with all that said, let's finish with Wisconsin, and then we can move on, because this all ties to the elections that are coming up and the failure of the states to take the same kind of drastic action as it relates to those issues versus what they've done to the economy. So right now here in Wisconsin, we had 36,769 tests that were negative. We have 3,428 positive tests. We have 993 people in the hospital, and only 154 deaths. If you go on, and these links are on this video and most of the videos, how to get to the state and the CDC data. And if you scroll down, primarily they have these tables and charts that give you demographics, and one of the demographics is age, and primarily the people that are going into intensive care and then passing away are over 60 years old, which is consistent with influenza. So, and they even have people going into intensive care who are 80 and 90 years old and still have more deaths than that. So in that upper area, especially as people have a harder time recovering, and they are having a harder time breathing, their lungs are probably, not doing what they need to be doing, and it overcomes them. So, and again, nobody wants that to happen, but again, I keep saying again, because it's again and again and again, the flu does the same thing every year, and we never cared. Never saw any news on it, never had this kind of extremism related to the flu. And I'm going to keep putting it out there, because nobody's putting that data out there in a comparison. All right, so I think that's enough of that for this morning with the COVID cases. So then I have been contacting, in the state of Wisconsin here, the Wisconsin Elections Commission, asking them what were they going to do to deal with the upcoming nomination process starting on April 15th, which is tomorrow, and it goes until June 1st. If you're not aware, all candidates have to get signatures currently under the law in order to get on the ballot. And it depends whether it's a state election, a county election, or a federal election. Each of those areas have a certain number of signatures. So like a county might have 100 or 200 signatures. Our state legislature, both senators and assemblymen have to get 500 signatures, and federal candidates like myself have to get 1,000 signatures. And I had been writing the Elections Commission for weeks asking, okay, so what are you going to do with the state shut down to make sure that people aren't running around with their volunteers knocking on doors trying to get signatures? And they kept pushing me off and pushing me off because of the April 7th election. And then after April 7th, they met yesterday or the day before. I think they actually met Friday. So yesterday was Monday. So they met Friday. And then they put out on their website that they're not doing anything different. So they're not telling anyone that they can't go door to door. They're saying you can do, and then they're approving that they'll take forms with one signature, which typically have 10, just to try to keep the number of signatures down, and that we could go ahead and do, like emailings and all these other things that cost money for a campaign. So it'll drive candidates who don't have that kind of money to get email campaigns together. The District 7's 26 counties. And you're going to have to try to email a significant portion of the population to get them, a certain amount of them, to respond and actually print out the form, print out the instructions, then make sure they do it right, and fill out everything out. Because not only do you have to sign correctly and fill out all of the information, you then have to sign as the person collecting the signature. And there's a whole series of blanks that need to be filled out. If any of that isn't filled out, that signature can be disqualified. I mean, this will be a nightmare process because it would be very easy at the end of the process to contest those, but then that also puts a burden on campaigns, because in order to contest signatures, they've got to go down there themselves and go through every signature and try to look for areas that are not in compliance with the signature process. And I don't understand why the state has the need to shut down everything to the extreme they are and then not take the same position on nomination papers. There's no reason to just simply waive the signature requirement. A candidate files their candidacy paper, they get on the ballot, and then you let the voters during the primary decide who they want to represent them. That process just seems to make so much more sense. But at present, the state of Wisconsin, and I have not seen any news that any other states plan on changing this with the date starting tomorrow, to eliminate that process or have direction as to how it needs to be done and what needs to be compliance, because that also gives candidates the ability to say, hey, that guy's running around knocking on doors, or hey, that guy's holding physical meetings. And in addition to that, the state of Wisconsin has not addressed how they will comply with the American with Disabilities Act. I mean, you've got this whole order and you've got all the direction related to having a disability, and literally you'll have candidates, the only way they'll be able to communicate with people is like I'm communicating with you now. There will be no way for a person with disability who's staying at home to protect themselves will be able to go out. So now are we saying they can't run, or we're going to actually make it very difficult for them to get and not have equal opportunity to get on the ballot? And so those are things that should have been addressed and have not been. And you should be very concerned that even though the governor is making such a big deal out of this, he doesn't seem to care that the elections process is starting and people will be going out. And ultimately, candidates who are not able to generate the signatures, because we tried to do that during the special election here by emailing people and asking them to do that, and we had little to no response. So the process of emailing and putting something on Facebook, the odds of getting people to respond to that and get signatures are very slim. So for example, my opponent, Tom Tiffany, will have the Republican Party, and they have all the Republican chairs in the 26 counties who will simply go to groups and get signatures, and nobody will be the wiser because there's nobody monitoring those groups. And there's no directive given to the parties, both Democrat and Republican, as to how they need to conduct themselves during this process and how they create fair opportunities for people with disabilities. So on that note, food for thought today as we wrap up the show. Thank you again for staying with me if you've stayed with me right now during the broadcast or if you've watched the video. Always appreciate that you enjoyed the content. And as always, please subscribe, like, and share. That only serves to help get the message out to more people and help me build my audience, which is very nice as well. Under food for thought today, I think going back to both the article by the governors and the Elections Commission, again goes back to you want to think to yourself what it looks like if someone or some small group of people are trying to take over. While it's very difficult to consider in this country, you need to think about what that would look like and then take a look at what's happening. And if you do that and you're saying to yourself, nah, it's all good, then that's your prerogative. My opinion is that it's not all good. And people who are running for office telling us they're protecting our freedoms are doing nothing. And they're doing nothing because they don't want to be put in a position to take a position that might damage their campaigns. So it's unfortunate that fear, again, runs rampant. So food for thought. How's fear impacting the decisions we're making, and how is that fear allowing a small group of people to capitalize on the situation? With that, as always, have a great day. Thanks for joining me, and stay safe.